of my compositions have been presents or commissioned by people who wanted something out of the ordinary. And so I, like the waiter in your favorite cafe, would ask, okay, what would you like? And then they would answer, well, I'd like this with the side of that, but I want you to think of my performing style, and then I would come up with a piece. And that for me is much more interesting as a creator than just writing standard prefab works. When I compose, and this also comes from a long time ago, I've always thought that I'm taking, on the analogy of the Iron Chef, the secret ingredient, the cooking ingredient, from the person who's asking me for the music. And I'm using that, I can hide it or make it obvious, but I'm using that to fire up my imagination to create something in which they have a vested interest in performing. Because if I, as a performer, I've been handed by now thousands of pieces that have no relation to me or anything that I do, and the composer just said, well, I've written this piece and you should play it. I mean, with no care for maybe my style isn't appropriate to their music, or they may not like my way of playing even. But it's like a vending machine where you go to the vending machine, you put in your money, and you get some music that you need to play then, right? So I've always followed an opposite track. I've always considered the person that I'm writing for to be an equal partner in the dialogue. And of course, I'm going to write what I know, what I imagine here and from my history, but I would want it to be relevant to them in ways that I don't even know. So I have to leave it open enough so that their personality shines through in the performance. Certainly for 100 years, probably by now, performers have been told that they're not skilled enough to compose, and that somehow composers have secret connection to the universe that enables them to be geniuses. And actually, that's not true in any way, because the greatest composers that performers admire were all those composers were all performers, every single one of them, and they improvised, and they had, for their day and time, a very wide range of references to draw from. So this kind of purity is something that actually developed in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, and then became academically enshrined. It's not really how interesting and wonderful and great music, whatever you mean by that word great, that's not really how it's created. It's created by thinking about all aspects all the time, and also thinking about your collaborators and your listeners. The 20th century was full of upheaval as far as understanding what music is. So, and every famous composer tried to have someone say, well, that isn't music. So, and all of your favorite composers as an orchestral player, among the most groundbreaking, those composers were told that isn't music. For at one point or another, even if you look at Nicholas Slonimsky's Dictionary of Musical Invective, you get to read a review of the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, of all things, which was described the last movement as not music. We hear wild barbaric cries and hear oaths and smoke and, I mean, apocalyptic vision for the third movement of the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. So, and people have consistently tried to enlarge the frame of what music is. And in fact, at every point, what we now consider self-evidently essential music, at every point that music was challenged and considered to be outside of the acceptable realm. And that includes jazz, rock, it includes Debussy, Satie, uh, includes Wagner, who then assaulted everyone coming after him, metaphorically. Schoenberg, Cage, Philip Glass, all of them were rejected as not playing by the rules. And each one of them said, no, the rules are actually much broader. And so, having traveled through all of those recalibrations, if you will, and building on Cage's idea that silence is equal to sound, and that in fact there is no such thing as absolute silence. And I now, dealing with my tinnitus, have discovered that to be the case, that there is never absolute silence. And I think I may have imagined I was hearing silence when I was much younger, but I now recognize that there was always some pitch going on. But I have understood finally that time, that music doesn't float in a sea of silence. It's actually, everything floats in a sea of time unfolding. And that includes light waves, and it includes sound waves. So we actually couldn't possibly be talking or hearing or understanding each other without that foundation of time. And what time is such a complicated thing to consider. But it also impacts, so the time plus memory formation has to do with how we understand things that happen to us or that we perceive. And music can be judged it can be judged or graded, both terms I no longer use very easily. But it could be perceived according to how it unfolds in time and what we are able to remember of it. And you could apply those measurements to anything that you experience. So languages unfold in time, and your memory, even if you're speaking a foreign language that is not your first, your ability to comprehend is based on what you're able to remember of how things unfold in time. Elisions, for instance, how words combine to form new meanings. The first language that you learned as a child impacts everything that you learn after. But it's never a straight progression, that there's always a feedback loop and that things are always folding in and reforming. And that is also a function of time and memory. I still remember that in certain contexts, the fact that you're a living composer is a matter of great discomfort. And it comes from a deeply embedded feeling that all the great music has been written. And that in order to be great, and it follows from that, in order to be great, the composer would not be alive. How can I possibly compete with a dead person for airtime? I can't write and then die and then come back and enjoy my fame. Right? I don't even know what I would do to be famous. And so my solution is simply to not worry about it, because there's nothing you could do. I have known people who've tried desperately to make themselves famous. And some have done it by trying to write as beautifully as they could. And others have hired publicists. And not worried about what they wrote. It doesn't matter either way. People become famous for an incredibly complicated number of reasons. But more importantly, people end up writing music that's useful to others for reasons that they can't foretell. They can't determine in advance what will work and what won't, because they're always dealing with unknown individuals, right? The bonus feature of this is that because it's my work is always very intensely personal, right? And I think that it I'm creating a DNA structure for the work that's not just mine. It's almost like a marriage of two, three, four, five, six different ecosystems. And the work has enough. Uh, I'm. This is probably going to be on my gravestone. Tensile strength in the relationship, a feedback loop of tensile strength that makes the piece itself something that I couldn't have foreseen when it's played by others. And then other people I don't know are drawn to it. And that is the best sort of immortality that one could hope for. Because one's care, the love and care that you put into your work as a present for someone else is then used by others. And I make this motion because I'm thinking of it flowing out like waves to another shore, even. I always hope, as as I'm very fond of saying, uh, when people challenge me about, I stopped writing 4 years ago. I felt that I had written too much, more than 360 pieces, and even if I'm writing on a deadline or writing for industrial applications, I put a lot of care into my work. Because I know what it's like to play, what the difference is between playing a carefully written work or something that's just mindlessly dashed off without much concern for the instrument or you any of those conditions. Uh, I always write with care, and I try to write as variously as possible, with the intention that different people will like different pieces of mine. And the nicest thing is when someone I've written for keeps playing it because it becomes part of their life, right? And as exciting is when someone I've never heard of and don't know hears my music and wants to play it. That's uh, I can't say how wonderful that is. It's just it's like making new friends. And even if I can't be there, and if they can't listen to me drone on about things when they ask a simple question, they can enjoy the music, which is hopefully never outstays its welcome, and is gratifying to play, and is worth hearing again. In other words, the other thing that is important about my music is that I hope that when you hear something a second, third, fourth, fifth time, you'll discover new things about it, right? Otherwise, it's very much like a chef coming up with an amazing recipe and presenting it in the restaurant, and diners take 3 bites of it and say, "Oh, that was delicious. Could you take that away?" And never eating it again, right? I mean, that would be terrible for a chef to work so hard at coming up with a prize recipe. So it's more important than anything that the care that I put into the work makes it viable for others. Uh, this month, I've actually started up again. I couldn't. When I stopped, I felt I just could not write another note. I just felt desperate to stop, and now I feel desperate to start again. And always for personal reasons. I mean, I have a friend who needs music to play on the mandolin. That is interesting. And he has a whole repertoire. And I thought, well, we know each other very well. I should write something that will be from me to him. And so I've done that.